Jordan Clarkson is the straw that stirs the Jazz drink, and that's why preseason is awfully hard to evaluate. We're talking about it next on Locked on Jazz. Bum 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 pow.
You are Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hi, I'm David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. This is Locked on Jazz. Today, preseason game number 2. What are the things we should be watching for big picture-wise? Does the 10-man rotation change that the Jazz used in the first half the other day? Why Jordan Clarkson actually is what makes this whole thing go and making the preseason tough. And then we'll look at the Eastern Conference teams who have the most positive estimated plus-minus players and who have the top 100 players on their roster. That's all. Coming up, this is Locked on Jazz, your daily podcast on the Utah Jazz, giving you insight, expertise, geeky numbers, and hopefully making it way better to be a Jazz fan each and every day. I am, did I tell you this, David Locke, radio voice of the Utah Jazz, Jazz NBA insider. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, including YouTube. And we're keeping our local podcast for you. Oh, sorry, little shot. Thank you very much to the everydayers who make this thing run, and thank you very much for making Locked on Jazz your first listen of the day. It is greatly appreciated to those of you that take the time to leave us a 5-star review on any of the platforms. Spotify and Apple are greatly appreciated, as well as all you who comment in our YouTube section and create such a robust community. Our YouTube comment of question of the day is, who would you like to see in the 10 today that was not in the 10 for game number 1 in the 10-man rotation? So that's your YouTube question of the day. Today's show is brought to you by Jase Medical. Who would you like to see in the 10-man rotation in the first half tonight? That's the first question, because that's really the most important thing. That's what we saw the other night. And I don't think we're going to see a great deal more than the first half. We saw a little bit, like Taylor and those guys will play in the second half for a few minutes, but not a great deal. And the other night, the 10 included Simone Fontecchio, did not include Kris Dunn, did not include Taylor Hendricks, did not include Omer Yurtseven. Which tells you a little bit how deep this team is. Here's what I think is the trickiest part about the preseason, is that the veteran players are playing kind of on their own level, rightfully so. Let me just make sure that's perfectly clear. And the guy that really makes this whole thing go is not Lowry, but is Jordan. And the reason I say that is because Jordan's the one who can go one-on-one, get in the paint, make plays, bend the defense, do all those kind of things. Jordan played 14 minutes and took 4 shots the other day. Like, Jordan played 6:53 of the first quarter, and if he comes off the bench, this is likely, and took 1 shot. That is Jordan being a veteran leader, understanding the importance of preseason for those around him, reading the room a little bit, and being like a real pro. In the second, played 7:27 in the second half. In the second quarter, took 3 shots, 0 for 2 from 3. But I think we could all agree that, like, Jordan doesn't usually play 6 minutes and take a single shot. And we did see a few times, I thought, in that game where guys could feel it that they didn't have a shot yet. Like, they're trying to prove themselves, establish themselves. Like, the Hunger Games of training camp has some negatives, and one of those negatives is that everyone's trying to prove themselves. And so, and they're trying to do it inside the team construct that Will Hardy's saying, but in all honesty, like, well, if I've been on the floor for like 4 or 5 minutes and I haven't got a shot, well, I'm going to go put up 2 in a row. We saw a little of that. Jordan's not doing that. it also means that it's a little bit of a false pretense to try to evaluate everything that's going on right now, because when it matters, Jordan's doing that. Like when we tip it off against Sacramento and Jordan comes into the game, his stamp is going to be fully on the game. That's what Jordan does. And so everyone is playing off of Jordan. It's a little hard to evaluate what they're really doing. So that's the first thing I would say. Like Jordan's role here, I'm pretty certain is largely, he's doing what he should. Our offensive rating, like when Jordan was on the floor in the first quarter, was an 80. All right, well, that's not going to happen either, right? Like we weren't very good in that stretch. So I just think it's worth keeping a little bit of an eye on. And understand that, like, okay, that's altering a little bit what we're seeing. Few other little tiny statistical notes that I would like, very small sample size, but let's keep an eye on them. In the opening 5 minutes when Colin was on the floor, we didn't play. Our defense struggled. And one of the questions is if Colin's going to play with Taylor or Kris Dunn or someone like that as the two. We're pretty small at that position, despite how big we are, everybody else. What's the impact of that? And in both kind of the two stretches that Colin played, our defense wasn't great in the first and second quarters. I don't know if Colin had anything to do with that. That would have to be, I'd have to go back and watch preseason film. And if I do that, you should check me into a medical center. But that's worth keeping an eye. That's worth just not like in a way that like there's something disastrously wrong or anything, but that's worth keeping a little bit of an eye on in regards to just what happens in game number 2. The other one that I would just kind of watch, again, is all the pairs. We've talked about all that kind of things. And really, I would watch them around John Collins for 2 reasons. One is like what we're asking John Collins to do right now is pretty dramatic, right? Massive change, new system, 3 practices, really. 3 hard practices, 1 soft practice, 1 game. And nothing. Yesterday we got at 5 a.m. They did a team event. I saw them all getting together in the hotel, but I don't think they did a lot of basketball yesterday. I think they went out and moved their body at some point, but not. So there's not a lot that's actually changed from yesterday to today for John Collins. So I wouldn't expect like some major thing to take place. And I really, as I said yesterday, I wouldn't expect it till like game 20. The other thing that this is where this evaluation gets super hard. As John Collins is trying to get himself figured out into this process, he could be slightly derailing the experience of some of the other guys, right? So if Taylor Horton-Tucker and Colin Sexton are starting in the game 1 and John Collins is starting in game 1 and John Collins isn't that comfortable yet, rightfully so, well, then all of a sudden nothing's flowing as well for Taylor and for Colin, and then they get you could evaluate them for that. So I just think there's a lot of really, really big moving pieces here. And so I'm going to watch like how is John Clarkson. This is clearly going to be a problem all season. John Collins going to be used, and who's he being used with? And then if the team doesn't play particularly well in that stretch, I might give the other guys a pass. Not that I'm putting it on John Collins, but he's got to be the least comfortable of anyone that's out there. So those are the little things that I think when we look at preseason game number 2, and obviously Jordan Clarkson's role to me is the biggest, and then John Collins' impact in his adjusting is the second biggest, where I just think we have to be a little careful on how we evaluate things. Will the 10 be the same in this game? Let's look into it. And if the 10 is going to change, how does it change? Because we have such depth, it's really kind of tricky to try to figure out. Today's show is brought to you by Murdoch Hyundai, located at 4646 South State Street, also located in Logan and in Linden. Thank you very much for those who have stopped by and visited. I got a great email from someone that the customers, the email was, hey, I didn't end up buying a car there. It didn't work out for my wife, but I had great customer service and everyone treated us great, and that just makes me super happy. That's all I really ask is that if you're in the market for a car, from the research I personally have done, you get the most bang for your buck. They got a bunch of award winners. You've got super lineup of SUVs from the Kona to the Palisade that covers everything. The Elantra and the Sonata are great for you on the sedan level, and the Santa Cruz is the kind of multi-use truck. So everything, unless you're looking for like that Chevy truck, everything is right there for you. So at least include Hyundai in your search, and then let's make sure we get you the Locked On VIP experience by going over to Murdoch Hyundai, and then you decide. Like I've told the story a lot about the first car I bought in Seattle here with my wife, where I did all the research, got right to the finish line. I was like, actually, I don't like the way the car looks. Like, this isn't going to work for me. So you've got to decide what feels right for you and what it is. But I do ask you, if you could, to stop by Murdoch Hyundai. But first, email me at dlock09@gmail.com so that I can actually set you up and give you the VIP experience. Today's show is also brought to you by Jase Medical. The world's a little wacky out there. It's not always clear what's taking place and where things, and what's next. And you always want to be prepared. And Jase Medical does that for you. The Jase case provides 5 life-saving antibiotics for emergency use. All it takes to get a Jase case is to fill out a simple online form. Some cases, jump on a quick call with one of the board-certified physicians. Get ongoing care for physicians for any treatment-related questions. Doctor created, doctor recommended. You don't want to get caught unprepared in an uncertain world. Is that a natural disaster, travel, pandemics, power outage, supply chain shortages, whatever it might be in a world that is just incredibly unstable? This is what is here for you to make sure that you stay prepared. Jase Medical is simple. You go online, fill out a form, and then you get a prescription life-saving medications right to your door. The Jase case gives you peace of mind so that you are not just hoping that you have access to medication in an emergency. Jase Medical, make sure your medication is in hand. Get $20 off these life-saving antibiotics today from Jase Medical by using code LOCKEDON at checkout on jasemedical.com. That's Jase, Jase, medical.com. Thank you so much for making Locked On Jazz your first listen of the day. We are free and available on all podcasting apps, and I just super appreciate all of you. Thanks for joining the live show yesterday. Our live show numbers were not great yesterday. It's always the truth, actually, is that honestly, we have somehow more viewers when we don't do a live show in the long run, but I do love doing the live show every now and then, so we'll figure it out for you. Have you subscribed to Jazz Plus? You can watch Jazz Plus tonight if you have not already. $125 a season. That's less $1.50 a game. Plus, you get 2 tickets to an upcoming game, a hat, and a T-shirt, so it's pretty much free. Go to nba.com/jazz/Jazz Plus and watch tonight. And listen. Still listen. We're still here. Don't forget about Ron and I. We're still busting our butt. I did look into the idea of getting an alternate cast of the radio broadcast, and it did not seem financially feasible. Honestly, I don't think Ron, we could draw the audience to make it financially feasible as much as I'd like to prove that we could. It's not that different than the great work that Bowler and Thurl do. So that didn't work out. All right. The 10 the other night was what you would have anticipated to some extent. So the 10 was our starting 5, which was Taylor Horton-Tucker, Colin Sexton, Lauri Markkanen, John Collins, and Walker Kessler. Then Jordan Clarkson, Keontae George came in the backcourt. Ochai Agbaji backed up Lauri Markkanen. Simone Fontecchio played, and Kelly Olynyk played. Those were the 10. Do I think the 10 changed tonight? I do. I think 2 players get moved into the 10 tonight. I think there's a minor chance they could give Jordan Clarkson the night off, which, again, to my first point, gets kind of interesting. Not that there's anything wrong with Jordan, but Jordan played a lot in the Philippines. He's played this summer. And so you could very easily slide Kris Dunn into the lineup and you just give Jordan Clarkson the day off. You just solve like the excess amount of players that way. Ochai Agbaji playing really the backup 3 to Lauri, and Lauri then sliding over and playing minutes of the 4 and the 5 so that then Ochai gets more minutes was a huge piece the other day. It's kind of what I've thought might happen all year long. I thought that was a huge piece to the 10-man rotation. Really interested to see if that happens again, because if that happens again, then we know we just kind of have 5 guards that are trying to play in that spot. So that might be the easy way you do it. You give JC the day off. You let Kris Dunn plug in there, and maybe you start Kris Dunn with Colin Sexton or with Taylor Horton-Tucker, or with Keontae George. I really thought the Kris Dunn, Keontae George lineup felt right the other night, because actually what they were doing is they were letting Keontae bring the ball up the floor, and then his first pass was going to Kris Dunn, and Kris Dunn was really initiating out of the first pass, which was letting Keontae be a little bit more of a scorer off the ball. And Kris Dunn is generally thought of as a non-shooter, even though he's made shots over the last 22 games with the Jazz, to a point where you probably need him to have the ball in his hands for gravity. So that would be the thought. If Jordan Clarkson wants to play, then you either are giving Keontae George, Colin Sexton, or Taylor Horton-Tucker like into the 10. If you put Taylor Horton-Tucker into the second half, he's just going to score 30 points against second-tier guys. It could be fun to watch. So that's worth keeping an eye on. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we didn't see Kris Dunn, Keontae George start with Taylor Horton-Tucker, Colin Sexton coming off the bench, and Jordan Clarkson get the day off. That feels like a move that would make some sense. I wouldn't be surprised at all if we don't see Luka Saminic in for Simone Fontecchio. I do think we'll play 9 this year, not 10. That's most coaches want to play 9 as their rotation in an NBA game. It just, the 10 gets somebody to play like 4 or 5 minutes, and that's a tough number on players. They don't feel like they're fully engaged, and that 4 or 5 minutes takes somebody else from like 11 to 16 and makes them feel fully engaged. So most coaches like to go to 9, not 10. But I do think for the preseason game, we might see Luka Saminic into Simone Fontecchio's minutes there. And I think it's going to be really interesting how we use those two guys. Simone, to me, is like a break in a case of emergency player. He's going to come out. He's going to shoot it. He's got that shot. He's got the release. He's got everything looks so good on that. And he, I think, can really impact games that way. Luka Saminic, to me, is a huge, big, athletic body that probably could just play rotation minutes. He's got to knock down shots, which he did the other night on that corner 3. But he, that's been the issue in his career, is he had to knock down shots. That's what got him that. And I think maturity are the two things that got him into trouble in San Antonio. And the maturity, I'm only saying because he told me that. He's the one who said he's just much more mature now and understands it better. So I do think there's a chance that we'll see Kris Dunn and Luka Saminic in the 10. I'd be surprised if we saw Taylor Hendricks in the 10. At some point in the preseason, maybe, just to give him that run and that experience. You can just see that the athleticism on Taylor Hendricks absolutely belongs in every way, shape, or form. And then at other times, you can see that it's just still a lot for him. The jump it's a big jump. There was a play where he caught it on the wing, had a really good idea that cutter was going to come through the lane, held it, stared the cutter down to get him to see the pass. Cutter didn't quite make the cut right when he wanted to. Then when the cutter cut, he'd stared at it so long that Amir Coffey just stepped into the passing lane and took the pass, because Taylor had been looking at it for so long that Amir Coffey was like, oh, okay, well, that's what's coming. So that should be really that's worth kind of checking out to see. But I'd be surprised. I think that the second grouping we'll have Taylor there. The other question is, Taylor, maybe Luka Saminic will play in the second half. Would play in the second half group if we do the same thing we did the other night of first half minutes and second half groupings. What guard's best to be playing with Taylor, with Luka Saminic, with Omer Yurtseven in that group to be able to give them the best experience. Omer Yurtseven's interesting. He's really a good rebounder. He's a little more offensive skilled than I think people realize. Watching him just around practice and the scrimmage and things like that, like he's got a natural shot. He looks comfortable. And I do think there's an interesting thing on him that if he played backup center, could you slide down big with Kelly Olynyk basically playing the 3, John Collins playing the 4, and you stay big all the time? That would be the only other guy that I think we might see in that group. There's always a chance you're giving Lowry the day off today too, right? You just decide that like he doesn't need 5 preseason games because he played for Finland in the offseason. And then that would change a lot of things in how this works. And that's what's tricky. That goes back to the same thing with Jordan, is that if your primary guy isn't out there, it's just really hard to make this evaluation on what you're seeing. But Yurtseven to me is an elite rebounder, and rebounding is an important part of what the Jazz are doing. That was my number one takeaway from that game, like big picture wise. And I'm curious to go start looking at other box scores. The amount of offensive rebounding that was being done by both teams led to like a rugby match under the rim on every possession. And I think that might be where the league is going, which does mean if you get a rebound, you probably can run a little bit. But it also is just that possessions are so valuable that no one's just going to get back in transition anymore on the level of saying like, okay, well, I'll go get back in transition and let you have the rebound. That is just not happening. The crashing that took place on the glass in that game was extreme level for both sides. All right, Eastern Conference. We did the Western. I think. Please tell me, you guys. I got prepared today. I was like, I think we already did this on the West. We're going to look at the amount of players they have that are positive, effective, plus minus from Taylor Schnarr's dunks and threes. And then we're going to look at the amount of players that are on a roster are in the top 100 players to kind of look at the Eastern Conference power and see if there's anyone we think should surprise in that regard. I think we did this with the West last week. If we didn't, please let me know, because I've screwed up and I need you to fix me like you guys always do, which I so much actually greatly appreciate. All right, we're just getting started. That's what's coming up, is a look at the Eastern Conference EPM and their top 100 players. Locked On NBA is still bringing you 30 minutes of league-wide conversation each and every day. So make sure you grab that on Locked On NBA. Mini plan tickets are available for the Jazz All-Star Plan, Western Rival Plan, Game of Month Plan, Starting 5 Plan, all at UtahJazz.com. So get your mini plan tickets. All right, let's take a look at our season projections, Eastern Conference. So, I don't think I've updated this since the trade. Boston is at 54.5. Oh, I have. Milwaukee's at 55.5 on the over-under. When we do our points gained, which we'll do next week, maybe we'll do this week actually, projections, I have some real surprises coming with Milwaukee. I'm surprised as well. Let's just say that. But maybe some of this will make sense here in a second. All right. Effective, positive EPM players, less than average, less than half the players in the league are positive, effective, plus minus players on Taylor Schnarr's dunks and threes. Boston has 6. The New York Knicks have 6. That's it. Those are the 2 teams that have the most players that are positive, effective, plus minus. Remember, when we did 240 minutes in the Eastern Conference, New York was the only team that had 240 minutes. Positive, effective, plus minus, Philadelphia has 5. That's the only team with 5 other than Boston and New York. Milwaukee has 4. Cleveland has 4. Jared Allen's out for a few weeks. Miami has 4. Atlanta has 4. Indiana has 4. Brooklyn has 4. And Toronto has 4. Chicago, Orlando, and Charlotte have 3, as does Washington, and Detroit just has 2. Toronto is at a talent deficit. Excuse me, Chicago is at a talent deficit. Chicago strangely comes out well in some plus-minus things. 4 players in the Eastern Conference are in the top 10 in the league. Boston has Tatum. Milwaukee has Giannis. Philadelphia has Embiid. And Miami has Butler. Top 30 players in the league. Boston has 3. Milwaukee has 2. Philadelphia has 2, including Harden. Miami has 2, including Bam. Cleveland has 1, New York has 1, Atlanta has 1 in Trae Young, and Toronto has 1 in Pascal Siakam. We now go to the top 50 players in the NBA. And Boston, who still only has 3. The rest of their crew is classified as non-top 50. Milwaukee has 3 as well. Cleveland has 3 as well. Cleveland, to me, is really interesting. I think Cleveland's going to end up with the number 1 seed in the East. I just think everybody else is going to take the pedal off. Their way of surviving is to do that. Top 50, Philadelphia still 2, Miami 2, New York adds to the 2, Atlanta 2, Chicago 2, Orlando none, Detroit none, Washington. Orlando and Oklahoma City are everyone's kind of posh picks to make like an impact. I think it's early on both. Top 100 players, Boston has 6. And that is 2 more than anyone else in the East. Boston's great. Milwaukee has 4. Cleveland has 4. Philadelphia has 4. New York has 4. New York, I feel like the over on 44.5 is a really good call. You decide. It's your money. But to me, and I'm not allowed to bet on the NBA, so it's pretty silly for me to make these comments, but that one feels like 44.5 on New York feels like they have 240 minutes. They have 6 players with positive effective plus minus. They have 4 players in the top 100. They have 6 players in the top 115. They're plus 7 with their key guys on the floor. Feels like they have a little bit more there. Atlanta's got 3. Teams with 3 players in the top 100 are Miami. They get thin fast. Atlanta, Indiana, Brooklyn, Chicago. Toronto actually has 4. Orlando, and then Charlotte has 1, Washington 1, and Cleveland has 2. So my takeaway from that is Boston is just deeper than anyone else with more positive players, more top 100 players. And Milwaukee is a little thinner than everyone's talking about, and it shows up when I did the Milwaukee's super interesting to me because Milwaukee, when I suddenly did points gained, which we'll do later in the week, which tells me where offenses are, Milwaukee did not peak out. In fact, Milwaukee had a bunch of red flags show up, which is super surprising to me. And remember, we did 240 minutes earlier. The Knicks had 240 minutes. We had Boston at 200. The best teams with 240 minutes. New York was at 240. Then the next best was 225, which was Cleveland and Philadelphia, assuming Harden plays. Then we're down to 220 with Miami, Chicago, and Milwaukee. We go to 210 with Brooklyn. Indiana is at 205 with Toronto. And then Boston's at 200 with the Washington Wizards. So Boston, the issue with Boston is if they're missing any of their main guys, they really get thin fast without a lot back there. So Kristaps misses 10, 15 games. They're going to have a hard time winning games when they're missing a guy because they're suddenly going to be at 170 minutes, which means 70 of your minutes suddenly are missing from your lineup. 70 of your 240, that's close to 30%. And those are hard games to win when you're at that level. And that's why I think Cleveland ends up being the number 1 seed. All right, that is Locked On Jazz today. Ron and I will have various updates for you on the various platforms. Follow me at DLock on Instagram, on YouTube, on TikTok, DLock09, and on Snapchat. Locked On Jazz on YouTube, DLock09 on Insta, TikTok, or Snapchat to get our quick 1-minute reports. Everything's going to be 1 minute this year. 1-minute previews with opposing coaches or 1-minute previews with opposing broadcasters, 1-minute preview from this, 1 minute with this. We're going to do all sorts of 1-minute things for you. It's the year of the 1-minute features here on Locked On Jazz and our Ron and I's coverage for on Utah Jazz Radio. Have a great one. Talk to you soon.